In his final moments, trapped 50 meters underwater with no air left, Miroslav had two options: die slowly by drowning, or die quickly by his own hand. He chose the knife. What he faced in that cave was worse than death itself. Some places on Earth are not meant for human exploration. Croatia sits Solta Island, only 19 kilometers long by 5 kilometers wide. This tiny island is a short ferry ride and an ideal day trip from Split, which is Croatia's second biggest city. It's a hilly island with beautiful pebble beaches and absolutely crystal clear water. It's a very popular tourist destination that's actually famous for its honey, as well as an underwater cave that kills virtually everyone who goes inside. The water is impossibly blue, so clear you can see the white limestone bottom 20 meters down. Tourist boats dot the horizon. Children laugh as they splash in the shallows. Everything about this place screams safety, beauty, paradise. 10 meters beneath the surface of this paradise lies a hole. A single opening in the seafloor that leads to something far more sinister than anyone could imagine. 31-year-old Miroslav Yukas is enjoying a vacation with friends on Solta Island. The sun is setting, painting the Adriatic in brilliant oranges and purples. Miroslav is relaxed, tanned, completely at ease. This is supposed to be the perfect end to a perfect day. It was a little after 8:30 in the evening when one of his friends suggests they go scuba diving. Because of its beautiful clear waters, Solta Island is a very popular scuba diving destination. Scuba diving takes place at all hours around the island. The vast majority of diving happens in safe little alcoves where it's not very deep and you can see fish and wildlife in a very controlled environment. But Miroslav and his friends don't want to do regular scuba diving. They want to check out the underwater cave they had heard about just south of Solta Island in Pogan Bay. They had heard this cave was extremely dangerous and only expert divers were allowed to go in there. Even though they were not expert divers. Barely novice divers. They thought, how bad can it be? Let's go check it out for ourselves. Miroslav and his two friends convince one of the boat drivers to take them out to the area in Pogan Bay that sits over where this cave entrance is located. They put on their gear, hop in the boat, drive out to the coordinates. The water is still. Glassy. Perfect. They jump in. Sure enough, right below the surface, about 10 meters down, there's this hole on the seafloor. The single entrance into this cave. The opening looks innocent enough. Just a dark circle in the white limestone, maybe 3 meters across. But this is the gateway to a killing machine that has been perfected by thousands of years of geological evolution. When you go in this hole, you have to go down head first because it's so tight. Once you go down about 10 meters, you reach a junction. A crossroads where two paths diverge in the underwater darkness. To one side, the junction leads to the shallow gallery. This is a space that goes down to 36 meters with no other caves or entrances off of it. It's just like a chasm inside of a cave. From the junction, if you go the other way, it brings you to the deep gallery. This is just a bigger version of the shallow gallery and goes down to 57 meters. Inside the deep gallery, however, at the very top on the ceiling, there is a very thin air pocket. This detail will become crucial in the horror that's about to unfold. There are several reasons why this cave is so dangerous, beyond just being an underwater cave, which in itself is quite dangerous. The first is that visibility inside the cave is basically zero. The only light that comes in is through that single entrance that leads to the junction. But the light doesn't make it past the junction into the two galleries. So it is truly pitch black inside those galleries. You also have all the silt that's caked to the inside of the cave. So as soon as you get in there, your flippers and your movement kick the silt off the wall and muddy the water around you. Even if you had a flashlight, it's like driving in fog. The lights only pick up the fog right in front of you. You can't see beyond the fog. In a tunnel, you shine your light on silt and you're just going to see the silt, not beyond it. So basically, going into this cave, you're going to be blindfolded. But Miroslav doesn't know any of this as he descends into the entrance. A little after 9:15 p.m., Miroslav goes in first, followed by his other two friends. The entrance is tighter than expected. Miroslav has to remove his tank and push it ahead of him, squeezing through the limestone tube like threading a needle. His breathing is already becoming labored from the exertion. He reaches the junction. Even with his dive light, he can barely make out the two openings branching off into darkness. To his left, the shallow gallery. To his right, the deep gallery. He makes a choice that will seal his fate. Miroslav turns towards the deep gallery. The descent into the deep gallery is like falling into an abyss. Miroslav's light beam penetrates maybe 2 meters ahead before being swallowed by absolute blackness. The walls close in around him, covered in decades of accumulated silt. He goes all the way down to 57 meters. At this depth, the water pressure is crushing. Every breath requires more effort. Nitrogen narcosis begins to cloud his judgment, making him feel drunk and overconfident. He touches the bottom, disturbing clouds of ancient sediment. The silt billows up around him like a sandstorm. Miroslav turns around and starts making his ascent. This is where everything goes wrong. On the way up, Miroslav gets to the junction. But now, in the swirling clouds of silt he's kicked up, with his lights reflecting uselessly off the murky water, he can't tell which way leads out. He makes the critical mistake of going into the shallow gallery, believing that is the exit of the cave. The moment he enters the shallow gallery, Miroslav realizes something is wrong. Instead of seeing the faint glow of natural light that should mark the cave entrance, he sees only more darkness stretching ahead. He probably bumps his head on the ceiling. Starts feeling around. He's kicking up more silt. He's starting to panic. Panic is the enemy of every cave diver. It makes you breathe faster, consuming precious air. It makes you move erratically, stirring up more silt. It clouds your judgment when clear thinking is the only thing that can save your life. Miroslav is looking for the way out. His heart is hammering in his chest, each beat consuming oxygen his body desperately needs. He finds the exit back to the junction, but instead of taking the correct exit out of the cave, he makes the same mistake again and goes into the deep gallery. Now he's in the deep gallery, feeling around, running low on air. Based on his dive computer, Miroslav was fumbling around in there for quite some time. Going back and forth between the two galleries like a rat in a maze, each wrong turn bringing him closer to disaster. At some point, Miroslav must have looked at his air gauge and realized the unthinkable truth. I'm out of air now. In the crushing darkness, 50 meters beneath the surface, Miroslav faces every diver's worst nightmare. His breathing apparatus is giving him nothing but the metallic taste of empty tanks. His lungs are screaming for oxygen that isn't there. He makes one last push to try to get to the surface, but he hits a ceiling. That's when he realizes, based on maybe the touch and feel, maybe he takes his gloves off and feels around with his bare hands, that he's in the air pocket. That thin amount of air that sits right at the top of the deep gallery. Miroslav must have realized at this point that there was so little air in this pocket that he probably only had a few minutes before he was going to drown. The air pocket is a cruel joke played by geology. It offers the illusion of salvation while providing only a brief postponement of the inevitable. The air inside is stale, depleted of oxygen, poisoned with carbon dioxide from previous victims who found this same false refuge. In terms of making his ascent to the surface on a single breath, Miroslav's only hope was this air pocket in the deep gallery. He likely knew the cave well enough by now to remember this detail. In his mind, he was probably estimating his depth, 40, maybe 50 meters beneath the surface. He was realizing just how little oxygen he had left in his lungs. Every second, his chest was tightening. The crushing pressure of the water and the mounting carbon dioxide in his system would have been pushing his body into panic. He couldn't stay where he was, and he couldn't make the journey upward without blacking out. The thought of drowning, thrashing helplessly as water filled his lungs, was becoming inevitable. Faced with that terrifying certainty, Miroslav made a decision no diver ever wants to consider. With the clarity that sometimes comes in the final moments, Miroslav reached for the dive knife strapped to his gear. He gripped it, steeled himself, and drove it into his chest, piercing his heart. It was quick. Later, when authorities performed his autopsy, it would confirm the unthinkable truth: Miroslav did not drown. He had died by his own hand, choosing it over the slow agony of suffocation. Back on the surface, the two other divers in Miroslav's group had already exited the cave system without issue. They were in the boat, waiting, scanning the surface of the water for signs of Miroslav. Time ticked by. 10 minutes. 20, then 30. The water remained perfectly calm, perfectly empty. No bubbles breaking the surface. No sign of their friend. After over an hour had passed with no sign of him, their concern turned to fear. They called the police. The Croatian Coast Guard responded quickly. This wasn't their first call about the cave in Pogon Bay. They knew exactly what they were dealing with. 2 trained cave divers were dispatched into the submerged tunnel system to search for Miroslav. One of those divers was 25-year-old Oliver Mirage. Oliver was capable and physically fit, a professional diver with years of experience. But he was not yet experienced with this particular cave's notorious layout. He was about to become the cave's second victim in a single night. Oliver and his partner descended into the dark, narrow corridors, their lights cutting through the silty water as they searched for any sign of Miroslav. But the cave was a labyrinth, and visibility was poor. With time and oxygen running low, they prepared to abort the mission and ascend. But as they made their way out, Oliver misjudged the route. Just like Miroslav had before him, Oliver became disoriented in the network of underwater chambers. Specifically, he became trapped in the shallow gallery, that deceptive area that leads many divers to think they're close to escape. His partner had made the same mistake briefly, but had managed to reverse course and find the correct exit path. Oliver, however, was not so fortunate. He went back and forth in desperation between the deep gallery and the shallow gallery, trying to orient himself. But every wrong turn brought him closer to exhaustion. The silt clouds he created with his frantic movements made visibility even worse. His breathing became rapid and shallow as panic set in. Each breath consumed precious air from tanks that were already running low. In the end, he couldn't find his way out. His tank ran dry, and Oliver Mirage drowned in the same cave where Miroslav had died just hours before. It would take the police 3 long days to locate and recover both Miroslav and Oliver from the twisted passages of that cave. Specialized recovery divers had to use guide ropes and multiple tanks to safely navigate the cave system. Even with all their equipment and experience, it was a harrowing operation that nearly claimed additional lives. By then, the story had made headlines across Croatia and beyond. The site gained a grim reputation that persists to this day. Even today, local authorities actively warn divers to stay away from this cave unless they have extensive experience with deep technical diving and the mental discipline to handle extreme stress. Signs posted at diving shops and marinas around Solta Island warn of the dangers. Local dive masters refuse to guide tours anywhere near Pogon Bay. The Croatian authorities have considered sealing the entrance permanently. Despite the warnings, year after year, reckless or overconfident divers still try to test their luck. And tragically, many make the same fatal mistakes, misjudging the galleries, running out of air, and becoming yet another name in a growing list of victims claimed by the cave. What makes this cave so deadly isn't just its physical characteristics. It's the psychological warfare it wages on human perception. The junction creates a false sense of security. Divers think they understand the layout: 2 galleries, simple choice. But in zero visibility, with silt clouds swirling around them, that simple choice becomes impossible to make correctly. The shallow gallery is particularly insidious because it feels like progress toward the surface. Divers ascending from the deep gallery naturally assume the upward-sloping passage leads to safety. By the time they realize their mistake, they've already consumed precious air and stirred up more silt. The air pocket in the deep gallery is perhaps the cruelest element of all. It offers hope where none should exist. Desperate divers surface into this pocket thinking they've found salvation, only to discover they're still trapped 50 meters underwater with contaminated air that will sustain them for mere minutes. Miroslav and Oliver were not the first victims of this cave, nor would they be the last. In the years that followed, the cave claimed more lives. A German technical diver in 2004, overconfident in his abilities and equipment. 2 Italian cave diving instructors in 2007, who thought their experience would protect them. A Croatian marine biologist in 2010, studying the cave's ecosystem. Each victim followed the same tragic pattern, entering with confidence, becoming disoriented in the labyrinth, running out of air while searching desperately for an exit that seemed impossibly elusive. The cave has developed an almost supernatural reputation among locals. Fishermen avoid the area entirely. Some claim to have seen lights moving beneath the surface on calm nights, the ghosts of divers still searching for a way out. Marine archaeologists and cave diving experts have studied this particular cave system extensively, trying to understand what makes it so lethal compared to other underwater caves around the world. The answer lies in a perfect storm of geological and psychological factors. The single entrance creates a bottleneck effect. Unlike caves with multiple exits, there's only one way out, and in zero visibility, finding that single exit becomes like searching for a needle in a haystack. The silt composition is particularly fine and stays suspended in the water for extended periods. Unlike sandy sediment that settles quickly, this silt creates long-lasting clouds that can take hours to clear. The cave's depth puts divers into the danger zone for nitrogen narcosis, which impairs judgment at the exact moment when clear thinking is most crucial. The 2-gallery system creates a false sense of simplicity while actually being a deadly maze. Divers think they understand the layout, which makes them overconfident and more likely to make fatal navigation errors. Today, a small memorial plaque sits on the cliffs overlooking Pogon Bay. It lists the names of known victims, though local authorities suspect the true number may be higher. The plaque is written in Croatian, English, and German. It reads, "In memory of those claimed by the depths. The sea does not forgive arrogance." Below the names is a simple message: this cave has killed experienced divers. It will kill you too. The cave in Pogon Bay remains exactly as it was on that September night in 2002. The limestone walls still bear the scars left by desperate divers clawing for purchase. The silt still coats every surface, waiting to billow into deadly clouds at the slightest disturbance. The air pocket in the deep gallery still contains traces of carbon dioxide exhaled by dying men. Marine biologists who have studied the cave with remote cameras report that the water inside has an unusual chemical composition, made toxic by decades of human remains decomposing in the sealed environment. Local dive shops have installed a monitoring system that tracks any diving activity in Pogon Bay. When sensors detect divers approaching the cave, Coast Guard rescue teams are automatically placed on standby. But despite all the warnings, all the memorials, all the technology designed to prevent more tragedies, the cave continues to call to a certain type of person. The type who looks at warnings and sees challenges. Who mistakes confidence for competence. Who believes that the rules don't apply to them. And year after year, the cave welcomes these visitors with the same deadly embrace it gave Miroslav and Oliver on that September night 20 years ago. Because some places on Earth are not meant for human exploration. Some places are meant to kill. The cave in Pogon Bay has claimed at least 12 confirmed victims since 2002. Croatian authorities estimate the actual number may be twice as high.